There is nothing more cosy than settling in for an evening with your knitting over Christmas, and I particularly love treating myself to some quick, instant gratification knits. So whether you are looking for something quick to knit for a loved one, or you may just want to knit something for yourself, which is probably what I'll be doing, I have compiled a list of super quick knitting projects for you to get stuck into this festive season. Hello and welcome to a very special festive episode of What Hannah Knits. My name is Hannah and on this channel I love to chat to you about everything knitting related, and today I have compiled a list of super quick knits, and as the title of this video suggests, all of these patterns are ideal for a super quick gift knit, and there is definitely still time to make these before Christmas. But on the other hand, you may just want to knit these as a gift to yourself, which is more than likely what I will be doing with lots of these. I am not doing any big gift knits this year. I'm not doing any garments or any significant gift knitting at all. And to be completely honest, it is a really good feeling because there's no pressure to get things finished before a certain date. However, I would like to knit some little bits and pieces, some little Christmas ornaments perhaps for a few of my friends and family. So I will definitely be picking some of the bits off of this list to knit this year. Very quickly, before we start talking about all of these patterns, I will just mention the sweater that I am wearing today. I'll move my hair for this section so you can actually see the sweater. This is the Amy sweater. It is a pattern by petiteknit. It's a really simple top-down raglan sweater with 2x2 finishings, and it of course has a roll neck. I knit mine in Peer Gynt, which is the recommended yarn for this pattern, and I used one of the tweed shades for which I cannot remember the name, but I will pop it up on screen if you are interested. Okay, so let's jump into talking about all of these patterns. The first pattern that I have is the Merry Mini Tree, and this is a pattern by Travelling Knits. This is a really cute mini Christmas tree, and the idea is that you put a little piece of thread on it and you can hang it up on your actual Christmas tree as an ornament. I knit a number of these last Christmas for friends and family. I don't have any photos of them because I didn't take any before I gifted them away, but they looked very, very cute. This pattern knits up extremely quickly. Once I'd got the hang of it, I was cranking one out in just over an hour per Christmas tree. So a really, really quick knit. It's knit up at a DK weight. The recommended needle size is 3mm, and there isn't a gauge stated for this, but to be honest, who's making a gauge swatch for something like this? And I think that this is a really great pattern to use up those little tiny scraps. So I was using either 2 strands of sock yarn held together, or a strand of sock yarn or fingering weight yarn with a strand of mohair. It was really great for using up all those little odds and ends. This mini Christmas tree is actually stuffed at the end, so you could use scrap yarn to stuff your Christmas tree as well. It's a great way to use up some more scraps. I bought some of the soft fibre stuffing that's used for soft toys, and I did find that there is a bit of an art to stuffing your Christmas tree. If you overstuff it, it will start to bulge and it loses that Christmas tree shape. So I found there was a little bit of an art to it, and the best way was to use something like a pen or a pencil to really stuff the stuffing into the points of the Christmas tree so you get that really defined shape. Next up, I have another Christmas tree ornament, and this is the Star Ornament by Adela Dutra. As the name suggests, this is a tree ornament knit into the shape of a star. This ornament is knit up on 8mm needles at a gauge of 6 stitches per 5 centimetres. So if you work in 10cm gauges like I do, that's going to be 12 stitches per 10 centimetres. So a really, really chunky gauge. And again, to be honest, if I were to knit this, I wouldn't be knitting a gauge swatch. I'd just be casting this straight on. From looking at the photos, this ornament looks quite sizable. It looks to be the size of the designer's hand. So I suppose if you wanted a smaller ornament, you could play around with gauge, use smaller needles or smaller yarn. I haven't tried this pattern before, but I would definitely like to give it a go this year and knit some of these for my family and friends. With these little knitted Christmas tree ornaments, what I like to do is actually attach them to my presents. So I'll wrap a ribbon around my present and attach this to the ribbon along with the gift tag. And I just think it makes a really nice addition to your wrapping. And of course, it's just a little extra on top of their gift that they can take home and put onto their Christmas tree. And I should also mention that this pattern is another free download on Ravelry. Next up, I have the Cashmere Twist Scrunchie, and this is a pattern by August Knit. I just had to run to the front door for a delivery, so my position may have changed slightly. I have made one of these for myself very recently, and this is another pattern that knits up super quickly, and you could definitely knit this up in an evening. And all you need is the hair elastic to go in the middle. Another one that's really good to use up some scrap yarn as well. The designer uses Cardiff cashmere, which is very luxurious, and I definitely didn't use that to knit mine. But in the pattern, she states that you will need 10 grams of the Cardiff cashmere. So if you do have a small amount of that lying around, this is a great pattern to use that up. This pattern is another free Ravelry download, and it is knit up at a gauge of 22 stitches per 10 centimeters using a 4mm needle. Moving on now to another super chunky knit. This is the Chunky Cable Headband, and this is a pattern by Mirella Moment. This is another one where the clue is in the name. It's a knitted headband, it's chunky, and it has a cable running across the middle. I have a really old furry headband that is super warm, but it definitely needs replacing, and I've been meaning to replace it with something knitted. I reach for this headband a lot more than I should, and I reach for it sometimes in favour of a knitted hat. And that's just because I can pile up my hair on the top of my head and still put this on and keep my ears warm. So on the days where I can't be bothered to style my hair, I reach for this headband. So I know that I would get lots of wear out of a knitted one like this. And with this being at a chunky gauge, it's going to knit up super quickly. So this is definitely on my list of things to make for myself this Christmas. This is knit on 7mm needles, and the pattern describes that it is knit flat and then the edges are sewn together at the end. I think that this could easily be knit up in a couple of evenings. I don't think it is that much knitting at all. The only thing is that I find with anything over a 5.5mm needle that my hands really start to hurt when I'm using those chunkier needles. So I'd maybe have to take a few more breaks when knitting this, but I still think that I could knit this up really quickly. And this is another pattern that is available for free on Ravelry. Sticking with the theme of things that you can wear on your head, next up I have the Cozy Winter Cap, and this is a pattern by Dreadful Velvet Designs. This is a super cute knitted cap slash bonnet that you wrap around your head. It comes over your ears and you tie it in a little bow under your chin. It's very vintage looking and probably an acquired taste, but I just think it is so adorable. I have made one of these for myself quite recently. I actually wore it out for the first time today because it has dropped super cold here now. So it's the first day that it's really been cold enough to wear something like that. And it kept me really nice and warm. I absolutely loved it. It does make me look a little bit like a medieval peasant, but in the best way. This pattern is knit on 4mm needles at a worsted weight. There isn't a specific gauge stated for this pattern, but you really don't need to worry about gauge with this at all because everything is knit to certain widths and certain lengths. So you can just grab your yarn, grab your needles and cast on with this one. I knit mine in 2 evenings, so another one that is really quick to knit up. As with most of these patterns that we'll talk about today, this is another great one for using up scrap yarn, and I would definitely like to make some more of these in the future. And once again, this pattern is free to download from Ravelry. Next, I have picked out the Harriet bonnet. This is a pattern by Milena Jahola. And this is a little bonnet. This is a full bonnet as opposed to the cozy winter cap where the back of your head is exposed. This covers the entire head, so it is a classic bonnet. And it has an I-cord tie under the chin, and this has stripes all over. This is another design which I feel may be an acquired taste, but I think it is adorable and it would definitely keep you nice and warm and toasty. I don't know if this would suit me, but I would definitely like to give it a go. This pattern is knit at a gauge of 18 stitches by 28 rows in 10 centimetres, so that is a worsted weight yarn that is being used. It is knit on 4.5mm needles, and a 3.5mm needle is used for the finishings. And this pattern costs £5 and 5p. This is probably one of the more involved patterns on the list. I still think it is a quick knit. It is something that you could knit up quite quickly if you put your mind to it, but I don't think it's the type of thing that you're going to finish up in a couple of evenings, or maybe you would if you're super quick at knitting, but I don't think I would anyway. Next, I have picked out the holiday balaclava, and this is a design by Thing. Again, as the name suggests, this is a balaclava, or a hood you might describe it as. It's all over garter stitch and it fastens up here around the neck with a button, so you can wear it up as a hood and it'd be so lovely and cozy. This would be really nice to wear sort of tucked into a coat, and you can put it up as a hood and it'll be so lovely and cozy, but at the same time, because it fastens around your neck, you can always put it down as well, and it just looks like you have a hood popping out of your coat. This is the first pattern on the list that does come in multiple sizes, so it does come in 2 sizes. This pattern is knit up holding 2 strands of DK weight yarn together to get an aran weight gauge, and the gauge is 16 stitches by 28 rows in 10 centimetres. And the designer has achieved this gauge using a 5.5mm needle. This is yet another pattern on this list that is free to download on Ravelry. I think this is another one that would be quite quick to knit up, but again, for me, this isn't something that I'm going to whip up in a few evenings, but I still think this is a relatively quick knit, especially with it being on those bigger needles. The final piece of headwear that I have on this list is the beloved aran. This is a pattern by Selene Coix Laura, and this is a beanie hat that is knit all over in a double moss stitch or a double seed stitch, and it has a pom-pom on the top. This pattern actually comes in 4 sizes, ranging from baby to large adult. So if you have a young family or you know somebody that does, you could knit a really cute matching family set with this pattern. This pattern is knit up at an aran weight, and the gauge is 15 stitches by 21 rows in 10 centimetres, and that is using a 5.5mm needle. With this being an aran weight, I think this would be super warm, and who doesn't want a really warm beanie hat, especially if you live in a colder climate like me. Next up is a pattern that I definitely want to make for myself, and this is the Jane or Janne yoga socks by Bella Helms. So these are socks that don't have a heel or a toe, and they are specially designed for you to wear when you're doing yoga or Pilates. The designer states in the pattern description that the purpose of these socks is to still allow you to be able to grip onto your yoga mat with your toe and your heel, but you can still keep your feet warm, and I need that in my life. And the designer also states that because these don't have the toe or the heel, this is a really great project for beginner knitters. And of course, it's going to be super quick to knit because you're not having to faff around knitting the toe, turning the heel. And these are knit at a DK weight gauge, so a little bit quicker than your traditional fingering weight sock. The designer uses 2 fingering weight yarns held together to achieve a DK weight. So this is a really great pattern, again, for using up any sock yarn scraps that you might have lying around. These are knit up at a gauge of 22 stitches by 32 rows in 10 centimetres, and the recommended needle size is 3.5 millimetres. These do just come in one size, but of course you can easily customise the length, and I suppose if you did want to modify by adding in stitches for the circumference, I think that's probably something you could quite easily do. And this is another pattern that is free to download from Ravelry. Next up, I have the Heidi leg warmers, and this is a pattern by Irene Lynn. And these are some really cozy leg warmers with cables running up the legs. And in the pattern description, there is a link to a video with a tutorial on how to make these leg warmers, which is always nice to have. These leg warmers are knit up at an aran weight gauge of 18 stitches by 22 rows in 10 centimetres, and the recommended needle size is 4.5 millimetres. And again, this pattern is available to download for free from Ravelry, along with that video that I mentioned that is linked in the pattern description. Up, I have chosen the berry neck, and this is a pattern by Witchery Design. This is a neck warmer with a rolled neck, which is knit in an all over ribbed pattern, and it is knit at a bulky weight. So it's going to be super cozy and warm, and this would be ideal to wear underneath a coat on the coldest of days. This pattern does come in just the one size. It is knit up at a gauge of 18 stitches per 10 centimetres. And it is knit on a 7 millimetre needle, so nice and quick on those chunky needles. This is a paid for pattern, and the cost of this is £4.78. I do think this is a quick knit and you could knit it up very quickly. I think the ribbing would slow me down. I tend to be slower when I'm knitting ribbing and changing between knits and purls. So again, for me, this wouldn't be something that I would knit in a couple of evenings, but I certainly think I could knit this up relatively quickly. Next up, I have the bandana cowl, and this is a pattern by Pearl Soho. This is a pretty standard cowl pattern, but at the front it comes down here into a point, so it looks like you are wearing a bandana. So just a little bit different. This is knit in just plain stockinette, and it just has some little garter stitch edges for the finishings. So really nice and easy, and I think this would be very quick to knit. It is knit at an aran weight gauge, and the specific gauge is 16 stitches by 24 rows in 10 centimetres. The recommended needle size is 6 millimetres. I would really like to make something like this for myself because it's not too bulky. This would be ideal to wear underneath a winter coat, particularly for walking the dog. I think this would be really, really practical. With it being knit up on that larger gauge as well, I think this would be so quick to knit because once I get going with that plain stockinette, it just flies by. And again, this pattern is completely free to download from Ravelry. There are also various different versions of this. So you have the plain stockinette, there is a striped version, there's a colour blocked version, there is a transitional stripe version where the colour sort of fades from one to the other. And there is also a monogrammed version, and it looks like they have stitched over, so top stitched over the top of the bandana with their initials. So lots of ideas for how you might want to modify this as well, and they are all included in the pattern description. Next, I have the Hottie sweater, and this is a pattern by Suzanne Mueller. This is a hot water bottle cover, and the designer has knit hers in a boucle yarn, but you could easily substitute in any yarn for this really. I am a very cold person, so I am surgically attached to my hot water bottle at this point. So I love a cute hot water bottle cover, and I've been meaning to knit myself one for a while. I'd probably like to knit myself a colourwork hot water bottle cover, but I don't think that would classify as a quick knit. So the reason I picked this particular pattern is because it is knit up at a chunky gauge. So it's knit at a gauge of 14 stitches per 10 centimetres. The recommended needle size is 4.5 millimetres. I think I would struggle to get a gauge of 14 stitches with that needle size. Maybe that is down to using the boucle yarn, so it may be a case of playing around with the needle size if you were to use a different yarn. But if you do have some boucle yarn lying around, this is a great use for that. It looks like this pattern comes in 2 different sizes depending on the size of your hot water bottle, so that's great as well. This is a paid for pattern, and it comes in at a price of £3.10. Next, I have another pattern by Suzanne Mueller, and this is the last minute handstulpen. These are some little fingerless mittens. They are just knit in a plain stockinette with a 1x1 rib finishing on the cuffs and across the fingers and the thumb. These are the type of thing that anyone can make use of, especially if you live in a colder climate. You can never have enough warm accessories, and I think these would be really nice to knit up in a luxurious yarn as well, because they wouldn't use up too much. These little fingerless mittens come in 3 different sizes, and they are knit at a DK weight gauge of 23 stitches by 32 rows in 10 centimetres. This is another paid for pattern that comes in at £3.10. The next pattern on this list is the Sola scarf, and this is a design by Anne Bensel. This is a little mini scarf with a textured pattern. The texture looks to me to be a broken rib, so nice and easy to knit. And this scarf is a long, skinny scarf that has pointed tips at either end, rather than some of the triangular shaped scarves that we often see with these mini scarves. So this was something just a little bit different to some of my other patterns that I have favourited, and it just stuck out to me, so I decided to put this one on the list. The designer has used a cashmere yarn for this. Again, this would be lovely in something really luxurious like cashmere. And the pattern states that you would only need 50 grams of the cashmere yarn, and that is the Eco Cashmere by Gepard Gone that the designer has used. So really nice way to use up those little bits of a nice luxurious yarn. This pattern is knit up at a DK weight gauge of 24 stitches by 32 rows in 10 centimetres. And the recommended needle is a 4mm needle. This is another paid for pattern, and it comes in at a price of £4.96. I really like mini scarves like this for using up scrap yarn, because you can easily adjust the length and calculate it so that you can use up every inch of your scrap yarn. I have picked out a pair of mittens for our next pattern, and these are the Slippery Slope mittens by Woolsmith Knitwear. These are full mittens as opposed to the little fingerless ones that we spoke about before, and these have this really striking ribbed cable design running over the hand. I've been obsessed with these for the longest time. I've just never got round to actually casting these on. And I know that I would get lots of wear out of these because I wear my knitted mittens to death. A really good pair of woolly knitted mittens are the only thing that can keep my hands warm on winter dog walks, so I can never have enough pairs. These are knit from the bottom up, as with most mittens, starting with the ribbed cuff, and the pattern has instructions for a longer or a shorter cuff, so depending on your preferences or how much yarn you have to use for these mittens, you can knit that cuff longer or shorter. And one thing to note with this, in the pattern description, it does state that this pattern is written with the expectation that the knitter can follow a chart. So you would need to be able to follow that cable chart to knit this pair of mittens. These mittens do just come in one size, and that is a width of 9.5 centimetres. So it's worth checking that, measuring your hand just to make sure. With these having rib, you would hope that they could stretch and be quite universal, but it is worth checking to make sure. These mittens do just come in the one size, and that is a width of 9.5 centimetres. So it's worth checking out to see if that would be a good fit for you. Bit of a shame that they do only come in one size, because hand size can vary quite a lot. You'd hope with the rib that would make them a little bit more universal, but it is a shame that they do just come in that one size. These mittens are knit at a worsted weight gauge, and the designer has achieved that by holding 2 strands of fingering weight yarn. And the gauge is 19 stitches by 28 rows in 10 centimetres. The recommended needle size is 5mm. With these being all over ribbed and cables, I think that this is one of the more involved patterns on the list, but I still think it could be knit up relatively quickly. It is still just a small amount of knitting, but the techniques involved are a little bit more time consuming. This is another paid for pattern, and it comes in at £4.24. The next pattern that I have is super cute. This is the strawberry pouch bag charm, and this is a pattern by Alexandra Solowinuk. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This pattern is so cute. It is a little pouch in the shape of a strawberry, and it has a I-cord drawstring, and the idea is that you can use it as a little bag charm. And there is also an option of sewing on some little beads at the end for some detailing to make it look a little bit more like a realistic strawberry, which I think looks adorable. This pattern is knit up at a gauge of 27 stitches by 35 rows in 10 centimetres, and the recommended needle size is 3.5mm. This only uses 60 meters of yarn, so really good for using up those little scraps, and I think that you could easily knit this up in an evening or two. It really isn't a lot of knitting at all, and I think the result would be so worth it. I definitely want to make myself one of these. The designer also has the equivalent to this, but in the shape of a little lemon. So if lemons are more your thing, definitely check that one out as well. This is a paid for pattern, and it comes in at a price of £3. I have one more pattern to talk about. This is definitely the most quirky that is on my list, and this is the knitted tea bag by Jenny Church. This pattern is for the jellycat lover in your life. This is a little tea bag that is in the style of the Jellycat soft toys. So it has little eyes and little legs. It is knit at a DK weight on 3mm needles, but the pattern description states that you could easily use bigger or smaller needles, bigger or smaller yarn to make a bigger or smaller tea bag. And it looks like he is knit all over in moss stitch to give him a little bit of a texture. And then the designer has used some little plastic eyes. So you could either purchase some little plastic eyes, or you could definitely just stitch some eyes on. and this pattern is available as a free download on Ravelry. So that brings us to the end of my list. Hopefully there's something on there for everyone. There's a variety of things from accessories to quirky little knitted tea bags. Do let me know what you are doing in terms of gift knitting this year. Are you knitting something lovely for yourself? Are you knitting anything for someone special in your life? Or are you doing a little bit of both? And if you're going to knit any of the patterns from this list, do let me know, because I would love to hear how you get on. As always, if you have made it to this part of the video, thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me talk about knitting today. And I hope that I will see you again very soon. Bye.